All right. Hey, everybody. David G., alcoholic, addict. Really grateful to be here tonight. Thank you all for coming out. Ashley, thank you for your service as always. Dennis, you as well, brother. I want to thank you this week for putting together that folder of everything that's in order. If you guys haven't had a chance to look at that on our WhatsApp group, please do. All of the templates and everything that we've been studying through the week, she compiled all of that into one wonderful piece of work. So thank you so much for that. We're very grateful. We've been studying about 34 weeks through this book, and we've been looking at it pretty in depth. We've been looking at self, we've been looking at spirit, and we've been sharing experience, strength, and hope, and looking at it pretty closely. So we're going to try to finish off this chapter tonight, and then we will have 2 chapters left, and so we're really winding down toward the end of the study. It's coming to a close sooner than later. So, and it's been a great experience for me. I'm very grateful that we're in the family afterward. I didn't know if I was going to have a family after what had happened in 2019. If I was a betting man, I would have bet I wouldn't have had one. But God had other plans, and I'm very grateful for that. And, I'm just so thankful for my family, not only here that I have my wife, my children, my grandchildren, but I'm very grateful for the family that I have in recovery with my brothers and sisters of all of you guys. It's been a wonderful thing. I was blessed to be able to speak at an Alcoholics Anonymous conference in person this past weekend down in Texas. And, it's always hard in the beginning, it was hard to speak at any kind of AA event because of what had happened in 2019 with everything that came out and the way it just all unfolded. But, God took that shame and he took that guilt. And I was sharing with a friend earlier, I was taught early on that we always want a certain amount of guilt because that's something that will most likely keep us from continuing to do the same things over and over. But we do always want a little bit of the guilt, but we want to be rid of the shame. And the reason why it was explained to me like this: guilt tells me that I've done something wrong, and shame tells me that I'm a low piece of whatever because I've done wrong. And I know today that we're not those things. We're sick people, trying to get better. And so shame is such a deadly thing. And when I got to the podium this week and I spoke, it was unbelievable that the people that came out and said, you know what, I suffer from that too. I suffer from that too. And it was just a beautiful connection that was made. And I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for the 12 steps as they're outlined in this book and the people that practice this way of life. There's nothing shameful about admitting that we have something that is killing us and that only a power greater than self will be able to heal us from that. I once heard a guy say in a meeting, he said, we walk around talking about being abnormal. He said, but I don't think there's anything abnormal about a higher power running your life on a daily basis. So I'm not so sure if we're not the normal ones. And when I read this chapter, I see a lot of that goes on. We'll see a lot about shame and a lot about anger and a lot about this. But we know that those are the things of self. We've studied this book long enough through these weeks to see that anytime any of that is going on, then that's self. And it's not always easy to get out of that. It's definitely not easy if you haven't recognized that as being the problem. I think she's the problem or he's the problem or drugs are the problem, alcohol or lust or sex or whatever it is. And as I've always said, those are all fleas jumping around, those addictions. But, let's jump into the book. We're on page 130 at the very bottom paragraph. And it says this: there will be other profound changes in the household. And there most definitely will be. One of them, for sure, is I'm not the one who's going to think I'm large and in charge all the time anymore. Now, I didn't know that was going to be a profound change, but it was. Now, I know here it's talking about he feels like he's not the one that is that way, but with some of us, we go right the opposite. It says liquor, or whatever it may be, incapacitated father for so many years that mother became the head of the house. She met these responsibilities gallantly. By force of circumstance, she was obliged to treat father as a sick or wayward child. And that's pretty hard, especially for somebody who suffers from lust addiction, because For one thing, the ego will get very upset whenever I feel like I'm being threatened or I'm being treated in that way. It just will. It says, even when he wanted to assert himself, he could not. Why? Well, of course, it was because of his drinking. But any time that self-esteem is affected, pride, ambition, security, or any of that stuff, we seem to go on the defense pretty quick. Now, if you remember all the way back over to page 65 in our book, if we just take a quick second to jump over there, and I'll try not to do this too much. I know I do this a lot with the cross-referencing and stuff, so I'll try not to do it as much. But we're always wanting to look at what has been hurt or threatened. As you read on down, it says on our grudge list, we said opposite each of our name are injuries. So I have my guys circle hurt, threatened, or injured. And if you look at the very last two words, it says interfered with. So there's four things that we look at. What was hurt, what was threatened, what was injured, and what was interfered with. And unless I've come through this work, and I know what that looks like in column 3, then I'm not going to have a clue what that looks like back over here. And so when somebody I feel attacks my self-esteem, I always react rather than respond. The beautiful thing about this is once we have these tools, then we can come at this differently. So it says even when he wanted to assert himself, he could not. For his drinking or his acting out, whatever it may be, placed him constantly in the wrong. Mother made all the plans, gave the directions. When sober, father usually obeyed. Thus, mother, through no fault of her own, became accustomed to wearing the family trousers, father coming suddenly to life again. Look at that spiritual experience in that sentence. Father coming suddenly to life again. That can only be accomplished by a miraculous spiritual experience like the book talks about. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. In this case, we're talking about quickly. Now look at how he begins to behave, right the opposite. If you look at the last sentence there on 130 to the top, he could not, even when he wanted to assert himself, he could not. But here, it says, once he has this experience, he often begins to assert himself. This is going to mean trouble. Because obviously, if somebody is taking on that role for that length of time, and we come along, have a spiritual experience, pull that out from under them and begin to do this ourselves, well, like it says, that's usually going to mean trouble, especially if she has no spiritual tools in order to help her to get through resentment, like we looked at, what was that, a few weeks ago, where we looked at the resentment and we looked at the prayer in the back of the book and all those things. It says, unless the family watches for these tendencies. Now, how can we do that? Well, if you'll flip with me real quick to page 84, and a lot of people on here are familiar with this because of the studies that have been done over the last few years. But for those of you who aren't, there's 5 things that we're asked to do on a daily basis. And if we'll do those things, if we will watch, like it's asking us to do here, and we will do what this says for us to do, we can stay out of a lot of these pitfalls that they're describing there. So it said, we'll jump in the middle of the page where it says this thought brings us to step 10, but we want to skip down a few paragraphs here to where it says, continue to watch. Now notice how it says continue to watch, not to wait on. We're not going to wait on it. We're going to watch for it. But here's what we're going to watch for. Selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And with my guys and myself, I put the word lust. That's number 1. 2, when these crop up, not if, when they're coming, we ask God at, key word here, once to remove them. That's number 2. Number 3, we discuss them with someone immediately. Look at that word, once and immediately, and he's saying you better get on top of these thoughts quick. Number 4, make amends quickly. So we see at once, immediately, and quickly. And number 5, we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. So it's asking us to do 5 things. 1, watch. 2, ask. 3, discuss. 4, make an apology or amend if we owe one. And 5, turn our thoughts to someone we can help. We don't even have to help anyone, but we must turn our thoughts toward helping someone. And if we can do that, we're going to avoid a whole lot of pitfalls throughout our day. So we want to use that 5 formula process, is what I call it, on page 84, which is step 10. The problem is a lot of people don't ever do this. Most of the guys that I work with that have been around for a long time that are either struggling in their sobriety or they're kind of empty in their recovery, I always go to right there and we find the problem immediately. So back to page 131. This means trouble unless the family watches for these tendencies in each other and comes to a friendly agreement about them. Now, anytime ego is involved, there's usually not a friendly agreement about anything. What we read prior is usually the soldiers and the spirit of self. But here we're reading about the spirit and the rewards from that. So drinking or acting out or whatever it may be isolates most homes from the outside world. Father may have laid aside for years all normal activities, clubs, civic duties, sports. So when he renews interest in such things, look at this key word, feeling of jealousy may arise. Where does that arise from? That arises from within. That arises from the self. See, I'm being driven by jealousy and by fear and by all of these things, and I think that's me. Self shows up as me, and I accept it as me. But when I get into this process and I start uncovering all of these things, I see that self is made up by ideas, concepts, beliefs, attitudes, feelings, and all these things. So it's no different here. When he renews interest in such things, a feeling of jealousy may arise. The family may feel they hold a mortgage on dad so big that no equity should be left for outsiders. There again, I don't think it's them that feel this way. I think they're being driven by something greater than the spirit at that point anyway. And that's what makes it feel that way. I say this often, and I have to be careful around newcomers when I say this. I'm accountable for every action that I've ever taken. But if I'm being driven by a system of thought that I don't even know governs my life to take these kind of actions, how could I possibly be responsible for that? I can't. And I don't take responsibility for that anymore. I do take accountability for everything that I've done. And that's a story for another time. Instead of developing new channels of activities for themselves, anytime that I'm focused on someone else more than I am me, then I'm worried more about what they're doing, what she's doing, what you guys are doing, than what I need to be doing. In fact, I just had a conversation with my boss about this not too long ago. So developing new channels of activities for themselves, mothers and children demand you stay home and make up for the deficiency. And I understand that. I do. But at the same time, the spirit is not demanding. It just is not. At the very beginning, the couple ought to frankly face the fact that each will have to yield here and there if the family is going to play an effective part in the new life. I love that, the new life. For obviously, we're coming away from the old one. Father will necessarily spend much time with other alcoholics, but this activity should be balanced. The problem is most of us don't balance that. I don't know about any of you guys, but I know as me, especially not only being a new person in recovery, but after being here for a long time, I still found myself way over on one side or another. I was always either helping so many people I didn't have a whole lot of time for the family, or I'd just say, hell with it. And, I would drop my responsibilities over there and run over here. And I got very sick last year. And in fact, during this study, I believe it was, and I was sick for about 5.5 months, and we really couldn't ever really figure out what was going on. But I got very sick. In fact, there for a little while, I didn't think I was going to make it. And while I was down, one of the things that I really got a chance to reflect on, and I feel like God showed me, was I was working with so many people at that time. Some of you remember this. I was sponsoring more than 30 men through this work in the book. I was in an 8-hour day, in a 10-hour day, 8 of those hours, I was talking with a different guy every day, every hour on the hour. Now, you can't help but suppress a lot of that stuff if you're doing that, because you're going to hear a lot of things, or I did. But what I came to realize is that I can't do that anymore. There's no balance here. And thankfully, I was able to back away from that, pass guys on, say no. I was at that conference this week and I heard them say that. Don't ever say no. Don't ever say no. I think there's a time we do say no here. And for me, that was one of them. I had to, because I mean, it had got to the point where I was so sick that I was of no use to anyone. And so when I see that word balanced, that's something I really, really want to look at today. New acquaintances who know nothing of alcoholism might be made a thoughtful consideration given their needs. That falls into the line for me of that, turn your thoughts to someone we can help. We've seen that back on step 10. And new acquaintances who know nothing about alcoholism might be made a thoughtful consideration given their needs. I do that often now. I think about coworkers. I think about brothers and other fraternities that I'm a part of. Most definitely my family, most especially my wife, and of course you guys. I just came off of a 14-hour day just before this meeting started. And so, but I knew I was going to be here no matter what. So I think anytime that we give our attention and thoughtful considerations of others and their needs, it takes us out of self. And that's the answer for us to stay in balance. So the problems of the community might engage attention. Though the family has no religious connections, they may wish to make contact with or take membership in a religious body. Alcoholics who have derided such people will be helped by such contacts. Being possessed of a spiritual experience, and there is a difference for me between having belief and having an experience. I wrestled with that for a long time. I really did. But if you'll remember back on page 46 of this book, and we'll take just a minute to take a run back over there. Let's look at what the book says about being possessed. Anytime you talk to me about being possessed, I usually know, because I think we're talking about self. I've been possessed by this addiction or this demon or that demon. But the book talks about another kind of possession or being possessed. The bottom paragraph says, much to our relief, we discovered that we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Thank God for that sentence right there. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and effective contact with him. I'd always been told you would never be able to do that no matter what. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe, underlying the totality of things, and here it is, we began to be possessed by a new sense of power and direction. Man, I want that. I wanted that, and I want that. But there is a condition, and most of us, we skip over this, but there is a condition here to that, and this is it, provided that we took the other simple steps. In other words, 3 through 12. So, being possessed of a spiritual experience, the alcoholic will find he has much in common with his people. Now, I've come to love my church family very much. There was a time that I really didn't care so much about them. I really didn't, and I'll be honest, or any of them for that matter. But I do find that I have a lot in common. Even though they don't drink and drug and act out the way I did, they still have resentments. They still have fears. They still have uncertainties at times. They have faith. They believe in prayer. I have a lot in common with these people. I never really looked at it that way. Their search for spiritual growth and contact with this power greater than self, it's the same thing. Though he may differ with them on many matters, and trust me, I do. I don't need to go into very much of that. But if he does not argue about religion, and that's what I missed for so long, because I would argue about it with him and with anybody that would argue, really. But what I came to know is it really wasn't me doing the arguing. I was being driven by something greater than me that was arguing about everything, not only religion, but especially religion. So he will make new friends and is sure to find new avenues of usefulness and pleasure. What a promise, huh? He and his family can be the bright spots in such congregations. He may bring new hope and new courage to many a priest, minister, and rabbi who gives us all to minister to our troubled world. That has been the great thing about having a relationship with the men of faith in those positions now. Where I once didn't think much of them, completely ignored them, talked about them every chance I got. Today I have a brotherhood with many of them, and they know the issues that I've had. They've sent some people my way, and I've been able to get them connected to find the help that they need. Because let's just face it, many of us do need help on the other side of church. Many of us do need help on the other side of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I say that to say this. When I took my fifth step in coming through this work with the guy that brought me through this process, when he listened to that fifth step and he heard about all of the lust and all of the acting out and all of those things that had happened, this is what he said to me. He said, David, you're going to have to find somewhere besides Alcoholics Anonymous to get your help. He said, you've got a problem that Alcoholics Anonymous is not going to be able to fix. And that hit me in the gut in a way that nothing ever did. I became pretty frightened at that time, and I said, man, I could not imagine going to another program. I just couldn't. And he said, I don't think you understand. The program is the program. It's outlined in the book, the 12 steps. I'm talking about a fellowship of men that have the problem you have, because most that have it in AA are not going to talk about it because they're scared to come forward. You've been put in a position where you don't have any choice. You're going to have to find people that can help you that are like you. And I remembered such a place because I'd been to it one time before. Didn't like it too much. Thought I was above all them, even though they were sober in this area of life and I wasn't. But I walked back into an SA meeting, and there I found the brotherhood that I've been seeking. And so it's been ever since. I love Sexaholics Anonymous. I love All Addicts Anonymous. I love all of that. I just do. I don't agree with a whole lot of it, like it said about the church or this or that. I don't have to. If it's coming from this book, there's no argument with me at all. I've seen a lot of men recover there. We do recover from this, I promise. So I like what it says. We intend the foregoing to be a helpful suggestion only. As far as we're concerned, there's nothing obligatory about it. As non-denominational people, we cannot make up others' minds for them. And I think that's where a lot of it falls short, not only in the church, but in the fellowship of AA as well. We try to make up others' mind. We try to convince them, that, oh, you're so sick, you need to come do this and do this and do this. No, I think when this person is ready, I don't have to convince him of anything. He's going to come to me. We're going to sit down. We're going to go through this process of the book, and there's going to be a whole lot of that kind of stuff going on. So each individual should consult his own conscience. Oh my God, I love that. So we've been speaking to you of serious, sometimes tragic things when dealing with alcohol in its worst aspect. But we are in a glum lot. If newcomers could see no joy or fun in our existence, they wouldn't want it. I mean, this isn't about being uptight all the time. We can never have any fun. I can't joke. I can't laugh. I can't go on. I can remember feeling that way when I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous in the 90s. And thank God for a sponsor at that time who would just, some of the jokes he would tell was just unreal. I mean, I loved him out on the street, but I didn't think he talked like that in here. And I think he did it mainly just to help us to see that it's okay to be human here, and that, it's okay to laugh once in a while. It really is. In fact, I insist on it most of the time now. So, but this is why if newcomers could see no joy in our existence, they wouldn't want it. We absolutely insist on enjoying life. We try not to indulge in the cynicism over the state of the nations. I stay away from that. I probably don't ever even watch the news. People tell me all the time, David, how are you going to know when something happens in our world? How are you going to know? Well, I assure them that they'll probably tell me whether I want to know it or not. And that has really been the case. Not so much anymore because I just stay away from that stuff. Nor do we carry the world's trouble on our shoulders but this is it. This is it right here. When we see a man sinking into that mire, which is alcoholism, sexaholism, drug addiction, we give him first aid in place at what we have at our disposal. What do we have? We have the message. We have the book. We have a program of action that works. We really do. There's an old saying in AA that I really don't agree with, and I've had a lot of people get upset with me for saying it. But you hear a lot of times that the newcomer is the most important person in any meeting. I hear that a lot. Now, I'm going to agree that his welfare by far is the most important. There's no doubt. But if he's the most important person in that meeting, where have I placed my recovery? Who did I put above me in my recovery there? So I'm not saying that he's not because of the welfare of what's going on with him, but I can promise you, if he's the most important person in that meeting and I take the back seat, then I just let his recovery become more important than mine. And I don't agree with that statement at all. It says, for his sake, we do recount and almost relive the horrors of our past. There's a lot of guilty, nasty, dirty stuff we don't want anybody to know other than a sponsor. But there is a time here when we need to bring that out and we need to talk about it, not in depth. That conference that I was at this weekend, I spoke a lot about lust and how it caught up to me after 25 years, and it really took me down in the fellowship. And I was able to do it in a general way, and people found that very useful. They did. I've had a lot of calls. In fact, I picked up a guy to sponsor from there. Been asked to speak a lot of other places. The truth is the truth. Not being in sobriety and recovery, for me to live under the illusion that there's really not ever going to be any more problems, that's insanity. I don't know about you guys, but that has not been the case for me at all. So, but for those of us who have tried to shoulder the entire burden and trouble of others, find we are soon overcome by them. Anybody do that with their sponsees, just really try to shoulder the entire burden. I don't do that anymore. So here we go. We think cheerfulness and laughter make for usefulness. Outsiders are sometimes shocked when we burst into a merriment over a seemingly tragic experience out of the past, but why shouldn't we laugh? Look at this, most beautiful sentence in the book, and I know you've heard me say that every page, but this has to be it by far. We have recovered, not recovering, we have recovered, and we have been given the power to help others. We've been given the power. I run around for a long time, people say, you don't have the power to do this, you don't have the power to do that. Yeah, I do. I've been given the power. That's a gift. That's mine. Now, what I do with that, if I stay spiritually fit and walk close to this power, I seem to receive more of it. The moment I move away from that, I seem to lose it. But I was only given power for one reason. It's not so I could roughshod and run over everybody, jump all over the family every time they need straightening out. I was given power for one reason, and it's right there, to help others. And all of you remember page 63 in our book, and we got to go there. We just got to, because this is where it all began. And all of us know this prayer. Some of us have even said it after this. God, I offer self to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self. See, he didn't say booze. He didn't say alcohol. He didn't say drugs. He didn't say sex. He didn't say lust. He says, relieve me of the bondage of self. That's the problem. That I may better do thy will, take away my difficulties, that victory over them. And here it is, may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, thy way of life. May I do thy will always. But also, in the promises just above that paragraph, there's 14 promises from the top of 63 all the way down to where that prayer starts. And if you will look at, there's one probably about 6 or 8 sentences down, it says, as we felt new power flow in. That's given to me right here. As I enjoyed peace of mind, discovered I could face life successfully, become conscious of his presence, I begin to lose the fear of the day, tomorrow, the hereafter will be born. Definitely probably my favorite sentence in all of the book. We have recovered, page 132, and being given the power for one reason and one reason only, to help others. When we stay close to him and perform his work well, he provides what we need every time. Everybody knows that those in bad health and those who seldom play do not laugh much. So let the family play together or separately as much as their circumstances warrant. Look at this beautiful promise. We are sure. Anytime I see those words in this book, that's a conviction. That's experience. That's we are sure. We're not thinking about it. We're not guessing about it. We are sure that God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. And I absolutely believe that 100% with all my heart. We cannot subscribe to the belief that this life is a vale of tears, though it was just once that for many of us. A lot of guys come in, they're so broken, they're so beaten down, and life is nothing but a vale of tears. But our great promise to you is you can be happy, joyous, and free here. You can be free not only of the addiction, but of the things that cause the addiction to begin with. And that's what we're looking for. We cannot subscribe to the belief that it's a vale of tears. But it is clear that we made our own misery. God didn't do it. And I have to remember that. I mean, and I could cross-reference it back to page 62, but if you want to look at that, you'll see the same thing over there. It says, avoid then the deliberate manufacture of misery. I think a lot of times I wanted to be miserable so bad that I didn't know how to act once it was gone. It was like I would deliberately manufacture that in some way or another. But if trouble comes, and I like to remember this today when I'm sober, if anybody that is here tonight and trouble comes on you or your family or whatever it is, our book says cheerfully capitalize it as an opportunity to demonstrate his omnipotence. Anybody on here struggling tonight, remember this. It's an opportunity to demonstrate his omnipotence. Now about health. A body badly burned by alcohol often does not recover overnight. But this is probably the more important part of it for me. Nor do twisted thinking and depression vanish in a twinkling. So just because we stop drinking, drugging, acting out, whatever it is that we're suffering from, it doesn't mean that twisted thinking and depression is going to vanish in a twinkling. That's why I started man in step 10 from day one, whether he's been here one day or how many years he's ever been here. Now, I assure him that what that's going to look like while he's doing it, as he's moving through the process, and what that's going to look like once he moves through the process up to that is going to be completely different. But I promise you this is something that he can hold on to make it through the rest of the work. And the guys that have followed this in their own sponsorship, I can guarantee you would tell you here tonight, that's a life-saving way of taking a person through the book. So we're convinced, we're not guessing or we're not thinking about it. We're convinced that a spiritual mode of living is the most powerful health restorative. We who have recovered, that should be a question mark there. Am I one of those? Not recovering, recovered. Not, it says from serious drinking are miracles of mental health. But see, I didn't recover from alcohol. I recovered from a hopeless state of mind that drove me to drink alcohol. I recovered from a hopeless state of mind that drove me to act out sexually and all that, whatever else it may be. That's what we recover from. We are miracles of mental health, but we have seen remarkable transformations in our bodies. Well, of course, if I'm not harming it and damaging it and doing the things I do, we're going to see a transformation there. Hardly one of our crowd shows any mark of dissipation. That's amazing. But this does not mean that we disregard human health measures. And for the longest time, I think I was so obnoxious and so rude about doctors and psychiatrists and especially therapists. I'd run around, well, if your problem's therapeutic, you may need a therapist. But your problem's spiritual, you got to have God. Talking all this crap, But the truth is that God put these people here for a reason. And I tell you what, after being sick that 5.5 months a year ago, I have a whole new outlook on what this means. I really do. God has abundantly supplied this world with fine doctors, psychologists, and practitioners of various kinds. Do not hesitate to take your health problems to such a person. Most of them give freely of themselves. Now, they might have done that in the 30s, but I don't know too many people that do that now. and it's okay that their fellows may enjoy sound minds and body. But try to remember. I can't always remember, and it's not even telling me to remember, but it's telling me to try to remember that though God has wrought miracles among us, we should never belittle a good doctor or psychiatrist. Their services are often indispensable in treating a newcomer and following in his case afterwards. One of our many doctors who had the opportunity of reading this book in the manuscript form told us that the use of sweets is often helpful. Of course, depending upon a doctor's advice, he thought that all alcoholics should constantly have chocolate available for quick energy at valuable times of fatigue. My problem is I eat so much of that I get fatigued, and then I want to eat a bunch more to try to get more energy, and I end up more fatigued. So it's like, there's got to be balance, with everything. He added occasionally in the night a vague craving of roast, which would be satisfied by candy. That's not the case for the sexaholic. Think of that. There's only one thing that will satisfy that at night. I tell my guys all the time, ask God to be with you in your dreams and walk with you and protect you from lust while you sleep. Make that a prayer before you go to bed. Because the reason is that will come on us. Any sexaholic on here knows whenever we're in our sleep or whenever we first wake up from a dead sleep, it's bound to get you right there for sure. So if I'm going to ask God to keep me sober, then let's try before we sleep at night. I guarantee we've had amazing results with that. A word about sex relation. Alcohol is so sexually stimulating that some of our men have overindulged. That's an understatement there. Couples are occasionally dismayed to find that when drinking is stopped, the man tends to be impotent. Unless the reason is understood, there may be an emotional upset. Yeah, Seth begins to drive them with the idea that I'm not enough, I've never been enough. It has nothing to do with that. It's usually a health issue. Some of us have had this experience only to enjoy in a few months a finer intimacy than ever. I didn't know a lot about intimacy until all of that took place. There should be no hesitancy in consulting a doctor or a psychologist if the condition persists. That's an instruction. If we do not know of many cases where this difficulty has lasted long. The alcoholic may find it hard to reestablish friendly relations with his children. Their young minds were impressionable while he was drinking, and probably while he was sober too, if he was anything like I was. Without saying so, they cordially hate him for what he's done to them and to their mother. I can promise you that was my and my son's relationship for a long time. The children are sometimes dominated by a pathetic hardness and cynicism. They cannot seem to forgive and forget. I don't think it's them. I think they're being driven by unforgiveness, by this mental activity that we call self. This may hang on for months, long after their mother has accepted dad's new way of living and thinking. In time, they will see that he is a new man. What a promise. Look at that. In time. It's probably not going to happen right away, but in time, they'll see he's a new man, and in their own way, they'll let him know it. And I've had that happen a lot. When this happens, they can be invited to join in morning meditation, and they can take part in the daily discussion without rancor or bias. From that point on, progress will be rapid. What a promise. Marvelous results often follow such a reunion. Another promise. But whether the family goes on a spiritual basis or not, the alcoholic member has to, if he would recover. That's exactly what happened to me in my second marriage. The others must be convinced of his new status beyond a shadow of a doubt. They were. They seen a miraculous transformation take part in my life. Seeing is believing to most families who have lived with a drinker. Talking isn't enough. I need to see some kind of action, and so do they. I can only say I'm sorry so long before they're going to begin to agree that I'm sorry. What I need to do is say, how can I make this right? And then I need to begin to make it right. When I do that, they begin to see, not only hear. Here's a case in point. One of our friends is a heavy smoker and a coffee drinker. There's no doubt that he overindulged. Seeing this, meaning to be helpful, his wife commenced to admonish him about it. And I think a lot of family members do seem to try. They mean well by this, but I think for me, like it's fixing to discuss here, if I see a man rapidly recovering from a condition that had been killing him, the last thing I'm going to think about is whether he eats too much candy, drinks too much coffee, or smokes too many cigarettes, My sponsor told me in the beginning, David, you can't be spiritual without a cigarette. Don't try to quit smoking. And thank God he said that, because I was wanting to give up everything all at once. And I don't know about you, but I become crazy whenever everything is gone. So I'm grateful he said that. Well, he admitted he was overdoing these things, so he realized, but frankly said that he was not ready to stop. His wife is one of those persons who really feels, keyword, there's something rather simple about these commodities, so she nagged, and her intolerance finally threw him into a fit of anger, and he got drunk. Look what came first. Anger came first, and then the drinking came next. That's remember the book says this is, resentment's the number one offender. Of course, our friend was wrong, dead wrong, and he had to painfully admit that. The three words that were the hardest for me to ever comprehend and to ever come out of my mouth is I was wrong. I was wrong. But he did it here, and as a result of that, let's look what happened. He had painfully admit and mend his spiritual offenses, step 9. Though he's now the most effective member of Alcoholics Anonymous, he still smokes and drinks coffee, but neither his wife nor anyone else stands in judgment, because that's what it was to begin with. She sees that she was wrong. In order to see that, the veil must have been lifted on her side of it. So our demonstration at times will help with hers. She sees that she was wrong to make a burning issue out of such a matter when his more serious ailments were being rapidly cured. One of the few times that we'll see the word cured in this book. Now notice it doesn't say that about alcoholism, drug addiction, sex addiction. Please don't get this wrong what it's saying. It said his more serious ailments. Those are the things that precede drinking, drugging, acting out. Those are the things that were being rapidly cured. We have 3 little mottos which are apropos. Here they are. First things first, live and let live, and easy does it. I'm going to stop right there, but thank you guys for coming out and listening tonight. It's always good to see you.
This concludes David's share on tonight's chapter, but we encourage you to keep listening as he answers questions from the audience and shares additional experience, strength, and hope.
Yeah, thank you, David. Thanks, everyone, in service, or you guys. This is, a really powerful experience for me, having spent this time in this group over the last few months, and with you, David, and the message that you share. I just want to share some experience more than anything, rather than a question. I just want to say that, I've been sober for a while. I've been sober for 27 years now, from drugs and alcohol, and I was really blocked. I felt really blocked and kind of like really stagnant, I suppose you could say. And, I've engaged with David, working the steps through the process that he has been shown and he works. And, I'd never accepted that I was a lust addict, and I was acting out in ways, primarily looking at porn and hiding it and feeling really, really shameful and dirty around that. And, I'm in a marriage, I have kids, and I'm sober, and I'm meant to be this, you know what I mean. And so in this process, and especially through you, David, and other men, coming clean and sharing about it, I felt really blocked, like I said. And now the last few months, probably the last 5 or 6 months now, maybe 5 months, I have not engaged at all, and I feel so much better just internally, and I've been doing what's suggested, daily 10ths, daily 11ths. I'm in the process, and I can talk about it. Prior to this, I couldn't talk about it. I felt very shameful, like I think you shared about that, the guilt, the 2 things, David, guilt and shame. So I just wanted to share that and just say thank you for that. I feel so much more empowered on the inside. My life on the external hasn't really changed all that much, but I just feel a lot more spirit presence in my life, especially my internal life. So I just want to say thank you, David, for that, and also to this group. So I'll shut up now.
Thank you so much, Jake. What you described is what we read tonight. And I love when you can share an experience that relates to this book or anybody. 133. First full sentence. We're sure that God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. We cannot subscribe to the belief that this life is a vale of terrors, though it was once just that for many of us. But it's clear that we made our own misery. God didn't do it. And for you to be able to come forward now and share that as a part of what happened to you in recovery after being sober for so long, my experience is this, man, I have reached more people with that message now than I could have ever hoped for. That was something I was not going to tell anybody. I was going to take that to my grave. God had better ideas, and I'm sure he does for you too. So we're really excited that you are where you are in the recovery. Man, you got some great things coming up real quick. So good to see you here tonight, brother.
Yeah, I love on the bottom of page 131 when it says being possessed of a spiritual experience. And that spiritual experience is so powerful compared to any religious experience I ever had before that. And in fact, as we share that with different faith traditions across the world, it says that we will make friends and sure to find avenues of usefulness and pleasure. And one of the things that is amazing is that as I meet, especially like pastors or rabbis, and meet them on the plains and we start talking, they're just blown away at the spirituality that we of this program attain once we've worked these steps. And they want that too. And it's amazing. I even have a sponsee that is a pastor, and even his own congregation, his family said, man, you are a different person. We have also, in certain parts, if I was to share my faith tradition, which is my religious, in certain parts of the world, it would not go well. But I have sponsees in that area, and the same power saves them. And in fact, in those areas, I was told that they look at this big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, they call it a holy book. That's crazy. And they're having spiritual experiences as well. Last thing I'll say, and I know David mentioned this a couple weeks back, but it's such an awesome story. It says on page 133 that now about health, a body badly burned by alcohol does not often recover overnight, nor do twisted thinking and depression vanish in a twinkling. We are convinced that a spiritual mode of living is a most powerful health restorative. We who have recovered from serious drinking are miracles of mental health, but we have seen remarkable transformations in our bodies. Hardly one of our crowd now shows any mark of dissipation. When I was down visiting David, we met with his lineage, which is my lineage too. And one gentleman walked in and his gait was off a little, but he told me of a story, and he told us, and that's on YouTube to listen to, of how he had MS and it crippled to the point where he needed 2 canes to walk. And after going through this experience, and like it says, that once the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. And this man didn't need those canes anymore. I'm not saying that's true for another, but I believe that we do straighten out mentally and physically, that this disease does cripple us, especially the sexaholism. It prevents me from being present with another human being. And now I can be present with another person and be in a spiritual connection with them. My sponsee of only 8 months, he walked in, he talked to his mom, and all she said was, whoa, welcome back. Like she recognized that he was back. She doesn't know about his disease, but something transformed in him. This is an amazing program.
Dennis, thank you always so much for sharing your experience, strength, and hope. It's beautiful, man. I just love it. I just like to say that access to power is more important to me than a belief in God. A belief without any action is just a belief. So access to the power for me is more important. And here's why. Because it lays out a path that leads me to a place where the problem does not exist. The problem never was lust. The problem never was drinking. The problem never was drugging. That was just what I used to medicate the problem, which is self. And once I gain access to that power, it takes away a lot of those crazy beliefs that I always believed, that always led me in a circle, and not to God, away from God. But now the problem has been removed. It no longer exists. How can it? We have access to that power. So anybody looking to go through this work, anybody that's in the middle of this work, please continue. Please, 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 because it's a beautiful process. It really is. Really looking forward to jumping into the Employer with you guys next week. It's going to be a good chapter. There's a lot of good stuff there. So thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Dennis. Glad to be here.